So today I'm back on the podcast with a friend of mine that has been on the podcast before, and he's back for part two, which either means he's brave or a little crazy, maybe a little bit of both. JP, it's so good to have you
Oh,
back.
this is the only podcast that's like, okay, come and be cured of your anxiety, but maybe have a little bit on the front end because you're gonna have to get naked in front of all of the world.
I know, but
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I have heard from so many people who have benefited from your journey
Mm.
and just feeling normal. I've had an influx of clients who are senior pastors of huge churches who've realized that they're not really good at caring for themselves. They're really
Mm.
good at taking care of everybody else, though, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
And so I think this is an important conversation, not just for us as individuals, but for the church at large,
Yeah. Well,
because this health, this emotional and mental health stuff starts from the top down, you know?
yeah. And you give me a discount for
Yeah,
for
seriously.
recording on the air. I get to use my coupon. And so I'm all in.
Yeah, but what you don't know is I send Monica the bill.
No, that's great. I was wondering what that Venmo was.
Well, it's good to have you. Okay, so last time
Likewise.
we talked, for those who weren't aware, we've had one on-air counseling session before. And at that time, we talked about really you being in a season of just putting so much on your plate, so much on
Yeah.
your plate. And
Yeah.
eventually you put so much on the plate, and mechanically the plate will break, right?
Yeah.
It can only
Yeah.
hold so much. And that's kind of what happened for you, really at a in a good season of ministry. I would say a high season of ministry, doing a lot of great things, reaching a lot of people. But then you went through a season of anxiety, heightened anxiety, that started small and then kind of grew into some panic attacks, and you going to the hospital, trying to figure out what was going on, and ended up just being too much stress in your life. So we unpacked that a little bit and talked about how you handled that moving forward, try to make some space for rest and try to be more balanced. So that's kind of where we left off. I'm trying to be more balanced in
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. I think that's all true. I would just say one thing I would probably say different is it felt like the anxiety and panic attack and all of that came on really fast. I mean, I remember one day I had a tingling sensation in my head. I couldn't, and it was the night after I couldn't sleep, and then I couldn't sleep, and then all of a sudden my heart starts beating differently, and then it just felt like I would jump out of bed in these panic attacks, and it felt like there was just like this low hum of, man, everything is not okay, and I didn't know how to fix it, and then ended up in the hospital. All of that happened pretty fast. I mean, in a 7 day period, where I was even just trying to find words for it. So.
Yeah. And then would you say that it unhappened just as fast?
No. No, I wouldn't say that. I don't know if it's ever unhappened fully, honestly,
Yeah.
because then what happens is you realize you're breakable,
Right.
and you're like you have this fragility to you that you didn't know was there. Like one day you're invincible and unbreakable, and then the next day you're broken, and then it feels like now I'm kind of spending the rest of my life putting the pieces together, and that's definitely a two steps forward, one step backwards kind of process. I would say I feel healthy, like mentally healthy in this season. And 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 no, I would say that to get there, to get to a place where I would say I feel mentally healthy, was a slow process, not a fast one.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's usually how it works. So one thing I want to ask you, last time we talked, I skimmed the surface of this a little bit. I said, sometimes it's not just setting boundaries and figuring out how to avoid burnout, but it's actually getting to the root of where the drive comes from. Like,
Hmm.
why am I wired to be high functioning? And
Yeah.
why am I wired to do so much and to say yes and to do
Mm.
more? And I alluded that, hey, maybe some of this stuff is from your childhood. Have you ever thought through that? And your answer at the time was, I'm open to it, but I've never really dug into
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we could go there a little bit today.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I mean, I'm
So,
super excited about that. Let's go.
that's the honest answer though. That really
Yeah,
is. I mean,
sure.
nobody is ever really excited about this
Yeah.
process. And I think that's, I compare it to going to the gym.
Yeah.
Like when you're doing the hard work of
Yeah.
strength training, I'm in the middle of strength training right now. And
Yeah.
knowing what's coming up is like, oh man,
Mm,
I really don't want to do this. But
yeah.
afterwards, I feel so
Yeah.
much stronger.
Have you heard of the artist NF?
That's a bad question because I don't know anything about pop culture. So
No, no,
no.
it's not. No, no, it's not. I mean, I thought you might say no. I
I
want you
just
to.
heard of Taylor Swift last week.
No, that can't be true. But no, I want you to listen to the song Mansions. Truly, like check it out after this. And it is he's walking through his childhood and he talks about there's rooms you don't want to go in. So that's what
Yeah.
I thought about when you said that. But yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely will. Okay, so let's start going into some of these rooms.
Yeah.
Um, when we think about the idea of overachieving and working really hard and just being the best that you can be,
Mm-hmm.
doing the most that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about a time in your life as a kid when you were motivated in that way.
Mm. To do the best I can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, man, I feel like a major underachiever as a kid, if I'm honest. The
Okay.
first thing that comes to mind is probably in art and realizing like I was a good artist and I was in some contests like some like UIL and like art shows and there was a still drawing contest and I got first place in that and like that like first place was a little bit of a foreign concept to me and so my story is I mean like so today I'm 6'7" 260 pounds. And so I'm essentially like the same height and weight as LeBron James, the greatest basketball player of our day. And and I, it's certainly proportioned different. And in that I don't work out as much as he does, but and it's like I'm awful at basketball. And so that is kind of the background more is probably feeling like a constant disappointment. I never excelled in sports or athletics of any kind. And yeah, and so that there might be something there, but I don't have a lot of thoughts of like, man, I'm really driven
Mm-hmm.
in this. I mean, I do, every kid, I assume when you have a project in front of you, you're like, all right, this is my time to shine. Um, but there was a lot of not shining happening.
Yeah, so you felt like a constant disappointment. Why?
I mean, I think it was just like I was tall, gangly, and non-athletic, and so I was like, I was the butt of a lot of jokes. Definitely bullied some, and yeah, just I mean, even with I know we'll probably talk about my dad at some point. He passed away in 2020, and he was mostly a good dad. I mean, truly, like he taught me a great work ethic and morality. um but he was a farmer and a rancher, and so I can remember one day where they we were this is a weird story, but we were throwing casts, and so they were working calves, and my brother was also kind of a cowboy as well. And so they were throwing calves, and I was little. I mean, I was probably like, man, I don't know, 8 years old. And they were like, hey, we want you to throw the cat, you to throw the calf, which means like I've got to go up to this baby cow, or bull, I guess, and throw it on the ground and like get on top of it. And like I couldn't do that. And I kind of felt like hey, I'm everybody's entertainment, and there's something to that story because it's like I can still recall it today that it stayed with me. And then just like everybody wants their parents at their games. I never wanted my parents at my games. Like I was like, no, you guys don't have to go. Like stay home. Like, no, no, I don't want you in the stands. You're gonna go and watch me ride the bench. Like I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to go and watch me miss the pass. I don't want you to go and watch me miss the free throw. Like, no, like please don't.
Yeah. So how did your parents respond to that? How did they affirm, validate, or were they more neutral, like of
Yeah,
that feeling of I'm a disappointment?
man, I had great parents, you know. I mean, I don't think they ever fed that. And in fact, my mom would always be, I mean, my mom was always like, you know, and I think about this with my own kids, there was something to the words she spoke. She was like, you can do anything, you know, you can do anything. You know, whatever you do, make the world a better place. Like there was something about those words that kind of got stuck in the echo chamber of just that verbal affirmation. I never felt like, you know, I never felt like they fed you know, you're not good. And that was more peer
Yeah.
to peer, except for, you know, like the story I just told with the calves. Um, I mean, I just wasn't good at that. I mean, I was constantly like high school, junior high and high school was like trying to find a place to fit in and like not fitting in anywhere. And really until, you know, a season of rebellion and feeling like, okay, I kind of fit in with the rebels, if you will.
Yeah. So your dad and brother were kind of like cowboy types.
Yeah, for sure.
And how did you connect with them?
Man, I didn't. I mean, I just really did not. I mean, I connected way. My mom was an artist. I was an artist, and so I connected with them. And you know, my dad was there, and so we would we were together a lot. And as I look back, I'm like, man, he was really available. Like
Yeah.
he wasn't in any way absent. And so we would spend every Saturday driving down the road to go work cows and that was 30 minutes away. And so we would be in his old Chevrolet pickup truck with the windows down, the radio off, and we wouldn't say a word, you know, 30 minutes there, probably 2.5 hours doing the job, and then 30 minutes back. And there were very few words spoken. I mean, no questions, nothing like that. And so every now and then I'd ask a question. And I mean, that's just like my dad was John Wayne, you know, that's just kind of who he was this like strong stoic. Uh, he was a little bit the life of the party. Like he had some charisma in social settings, but he was just a man of few words. And when it was like he and I. And so, man, I've really like, you know, I serve in a men's ministry I'm on the board of, and you know, I'm like, man, do I have a father wound? You know, it's like if it's there, I want to find it, but I don't think so. But man, you know, you may find out otherwise.
Yeah. You know, oftentimes when I see these type of father-son relationships, it's never a lack of love. You
Yeah,
know, oftentimes it's not a lack of love, it's more of a lack of a skill set,
yeah,
the skill set of connecting, the skill set of
yeah,
initiating emotional connection. And there's so many people in the generation before us that didn't necessarily have that skill set.
yeah,
And in fact, not talking about certain things was how a lot of people in the generations before us survived and
yeah,
coped with the hard things in life. So it's not necessarily a lack of love,
yeah.
but sometimes it's a lack of skill that gets in the way of initiating relationship. I mean, how did you interpret that as a kid? Thankfully, it sounds like you didn't interpret it in a negative way.
Yeah, I don't think, you know, my dad never said I love you. And so I've kind of worked through that too. And but it was that's kind of who he was that, you know, Southern strong cowboy type. But I like never really questioned that he did. He was a great provider and protector. And when I say provider, not like we were not wealthy, but he was a very hard worker. And I mean, he did everything he needed to do to one, to like put food on the table, but two, also, you know, we went on vacations and he took me hunting and it was, you know, it wasn't always stuff I enjoyed doing, but the I could tell there was a commitment from him to invest in our relationship. Um, you know, I really, you know, you kind of asked the question of why are you so driven? And I'll say two things. I've wondered, do I have something that's like trying to prove myself to all the people along the way that said you couldn't? Like I've wondered, like, hey, is that there? Like there's definitely something in me that wants to be the best. And even in I can see it in my prayer life. Like I'll ask God, I'm like, Lord, I want to be the best. Would you make me the best preacher, the best communicator of your word? Would you make me the best leader of a staff, the best pastor? I just kind of use that language a lot. I desire to be the best. And then you have like popular language right now with like John Mark Comer, the ruthless elimination of hurry, to Jeff Bethke, to hell with the hustle. But if we just camp on this Dallas Willard line, the ruthless elimination of hurry, it's like, dude, I want to eliminate hurry. Like, how do I do that? Like, I feel hurried all the time. Like, I feel like constantly rushed. And so, even as you have used language before, like, hey, you put a lot on your plate, I'm like, that's interesting because the language you use is not what I feel. It's not you kind of make me the bad guy in that is like, hey, you put a lot on your plate. It's like that's interesting. I don't feel that way. I feel like a lot of stuff gets put on the plate and I can't help it.
Hmm.
And it's like, man, I'd love to scrape stuff off the plate. I just don't know how. And it seems like the more you climb up the leadership ladder, it's like the more stuff comes in, and even the stuff that comes in can be overwhelming. And it feels like I'm just like, even to have to say no feels like it takes a lot of time that and so it's like, oh, that's like something on the plate. And so, I'd love to figure that out. And then the last thing I'll say, I'm just trying to give you some ammunition to fix me, is is like I know like something's wrong because I'll go on vacation and it's like, all right, this is downtime, and there's like this, I've got major FOMO. And so if I'm somewhere, it's like I feel like all of this stuff is happening around me and I've got to find out what it is. And so even when we don't have anything planned, I will fill the time. Like it's like we got to go here and then here and then here, and then next thing you know, we're on vacation with a bunch of to-dos. We've got to go to this place and we've got to be at this dolphin watching tour, and I booked fishing for tomorrow. And so it's like I don't rest well. I don't not hurry well, but I want to. And like if somebody can teach me how, it's like I'm a willing participant. Like I want to learn how.
Yeah. Yeah, I do use that language a lot. And not to make you the bad guy, but to give you ownership and responsibility, to give you
Yeah.
power and control. I mean, if the plate is really out of our hands, then we're all susceptible to breaking at any moment.
Yeah.
And that's a far more dangerous way to live than saying, yeah, the plate belongs to me and I get to decide what's on it and what's not on it.
Yeah.
So really, it's more ownership, I would say, than blame.
Sure.
And it almost sounds to me like you're overcompensating for the feeling of, I don't have anything to offer. I'm a disappointment.
Yeah.
Like overcompensating. I'm going to do above and beyond. I'm going to do more this time around because I found that I can. But I'm curious when that shift happened. If you were constantly underperforming your whole childhood, your whole life, disappointment, underperformance, when was the first time that you felt like that shifted?
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but I'll tell you. So we grew up relatively poor in the country in a small town, and then I went to a technical college, studied art, somehow graduated, partied a bunch in college,
I can't
and
believe you studied art.
yeah, I know, and from a technical college nonetheless. So, and then I moved to Dallas, Texas, and and I landed a job in sales, which eventually led to a job in corporate America as an account manager, global account manager. And so now I'm like making money and it feels like I have a real job. Like I'm working with people a lot older than me. And I'm kind of thinking like, man, this could be my job the rest of my life. And I'm putting on a suit every day and basically became kind of this small town boy, became this like man who is kind of everything wrong with Dallas in a person. Like I had a Jaguar S type, you know, which is an obnoxious car for a 21-year-old, and had a penthouse condo, and finding identity in watches and suits and bottle service at the club, And around this time, I become a Christian. I'm at a club 21 years ago, and someone invites me to church, and I go hungover, and I start to wrestle with who is Jesus, and really surrender my life to Christ, believing upon his death and resurrection for the forgiveness of sins. And all of these things in my life radically changed because I realized, like, oh, even from a performance perspective, like, oh, like I can't pay for my sins. He paid for my sins, and so that became this really interesting thing. And meanwhile, I'm experiencing success, like from a worldly perspective. And so I think that's probably where that drive kicked in, as I learned, like, wow, I can make money. I like, God has always given me an ability to make money, and in a weird way, I don't know how to explain it. Just buying and selling, understanding like how that works, and just being entrepreneurial. And so I was discipled in that church for 5 years, and then the calling to ministry happened. And so, and that felt like a really healthy shift, because I was going from making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to making $40,000 a year working at a church. And it wasn't like they said, come and preach. It was like, come and set out chairs and like help people in small groups. But it was this pure, man, God is real. And it like, my drive went away, because the corporate ladder was toxic in a sense for me, because it was just like, you saw the next rung, you saw the next rung. I remember I interviewed with my boss, and I said, here's what's going to happen is, I'm going to work so hard for you that you're going to get promoted, and I just need you to take me with you. And like, that's the game we're going to play, and we're going to keep running it, but I'm going to be the best, and then when I went into, so that was the corporate ladder. Well, when I went into ministry, it was like God set me in a room, and it was foggy, and I couldn't even see the corners of the room, much less the door. It's like, I didn't know, there was no ladder, there was nowhere to go. I didn't want to plant a church. It was just like, hey, I'm just now going to serve. But in that moment, God was so real to me, because it felt like I had just put my whole life where my faith was, if you will. It's like I said, hey, if this is true, then I'm going to give the rest of my life to serving this God. And then I think what happened, when if you go from that moment to the anxiety, panic, breakdown, it felt like all of a sudden, oh, there is a ladder. Oh, there is a game. There is a treadmill. Oh, there are book deals. Oh, there are followers. Oh, there are speaking engagements. There are honorariums. You can make money. And all of that kind of came in. And now I'm like, am I still doing this for the right reasons? Like, is my motive still pure here? And that's when it felt like it all came kind of crashing down in that moment.
Yeah, that's the interesting part about it. Like you said, there's a ladder in both places,
Sure.
There's one here and one here. One just looks really Christian,
Yep.
but what's underneath the surface of that? Like what's going on behind the scenes? And I think that's something to really dig into. Like, why is that happening? And where is this coming from?
Yeah.
What's the underlying motivation for me?
Well,
Is it about um overcompensating for my
yeah.
past, feeling like I'm not a disappointment anymore. I found the path
Yeah.
to being adequate when I've felt inadequate my whole life. And I wonder, I don't know, how do you think y- it all plays out for you underneath the surface? What do you feel like is going on underneath the surface of that?
Yeah. I'm not sure. Like, I promise I'd tell you if I knew, but I want to make sure you connect these dots too. Is like, in some ways I've, I don't know if it's self-sabotage or self-soothe or self-heal, but in the midst of in the corporate America, climbing the ladder, I go into ministry. And so basically I kind of take away all financial incentives away. And that felt really healthy. And so then all of that happens where, in a lot of ways, over, not quickly, but over 10 years, over a decade, I become successful in ministry. I mean, I mean, and when I say successful, I mean, not just like people are getting saved and I'm helping people, but even like, in some ways, even financially successful in some ways. And so then the opportunity in Waco came. And so I'm like, I'm at this moment in my life, I'm pastoring, and I'm sparing you the humble disclaimers, just for brevity and clarity.
Hmm.
But I'm pastoring a 20,000 person church, and leading the largest young adult ministry in the world. And then I'm like, all right, there's and I'm processing opportunities, and I really don't want to leave. Like, I mean, it was amazing. I like love Watermark. I mean, it's amazing church and amazing leaders, amazing pastors, amazing people. And and as I'm processing opportunities, I sense the Lord calling us to a church in Waco. That's also a very incredible church made of incredible people, and it was much smaller and financially less money. So it's less people, less money, less notoriety. And so again, and then that, I think that felt like a step toward health again. And so there's these moments where I'm kind of choosing less, if you will, and it seems like God has blessed that. And so it's like I don't know what to do with that. So what's happening under the surface? Like what's the driver, the motivator? Man, I don't know in the most generic sense. I'm sure there's like a search for significance, and I'm always wrestling with that term, the ruthless elimination of hurry, because I'm like, man, I don't know how to do less, and it seems like choosing to be less excellent, and I that doesn't
Mm,
feel like that honors God. So I'm like
okay.
wrestle with that.
Okay. So let me ask you this. I've seen you ask this question, and I want to ask it back to you. If
Yeah.
the enemy could take you down with one lie,
Yeah. What
what
would it
would it
be?
be?
Um, how did I answer that recently? Because like forever it was like, I would talk about lust, and I
Could
don't
be
think
different in
it's
different seasons, right?
yeah, I don't think it's lust. I think it's gosh, what did I said something recently? So I'm gonna try to stop. I'm gonna
Hmm.
try to forget what I was going to say and just answer the question.
Yeah.
If the enemy was going to take me out with one lie, um, I think it would be. Uh, it's weird, like Deborah. I can't figure out if it's like you're enough or you're not enough. It's like I don't know. Those are so contrasting.
Hmm.
Meaning like, hey, look at what you did, kind of pride, or like the opposite of pride, the insecurity of like you're a poser, you're a fake, you're a fraud. That like believing those lies, and so it's like I don't know which one it is. Can't tell.
And what's interesting is both of those to the extreme, like fall into the pendulum of unhealth.
Sure.
I'm enough.
Yeah.
I'm amazing. I look at
Yeah.
what my hands have built
Yeah. Yeah.
versus the other side of like, I'm nothing. I'm a
Yeah.
fraud. I'm a
Yeah.
failure. Both of those are the same train of thinking, but going from one to the other. I
Yeah.
mean, do you feel like you waffle from one end of that to the other?
In unhealth for sure. I mean, in thinking of how the enemy would take me out. I mean, to make that distinction. So I think in health, I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, I am simply a tool in the Lord's hand, and He's doing stuff in spite of me. And you know, and I think where my theology can get jacked up. I was raised Roman Catholic, and there was like a performance aspect to that, and so this could be all faith related, where like when it's good, I feel like I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like I'm just waiting for God to remove the blessing. And I think in sound theology and with the right understanding of the scripture, it's like, man, God loves me and He desires good for me. And like, which if any of His children, ask for a loaf of bread, well, He's not going to give them a stone. And if any of us ask Him for a fish, He's not going to give us a snake. And so if that's how earthly dads treat their sons, how much better is our Heavenly Father? And so it's like I will struggle to believe that for whatever reason. And so in unhealth, yes, I think I waffle between, hey, I'm amazing, and oh, I'm a fraud, kind of what's it called? The
Imposter syndrome.
yeah, imposter syndrome. And then in health, it's like, no, the Lord loves me, and He's just using me in spite of me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's clear that you do have a lot of performance themes in your life, whether it's not performing how I want to perform, or
Mm,
performing to the best of my ability.
Totally.
And and like you said, I think in health, the balance is realizing that it's not the reward I'm after. It's not the ladder I'm after. It's not the prize I'm after. It's Jesus. Like
Yeah.
he is the reward.
Right.
And worst case scenario, if all of it was stripped away, how do you think you would do?
Um, and I hope I would be fine. And I think about that a lot, believe it or not. And so, man, I hope I would be fine. How would I do? I'm sure there would be fleshly struggles, and I hope I would just be able to see the bright side and trust the Lord and say, all right, he's teaching me something. Um, I need to he wants me to rest. I mean, it's like I really do, like in moments of health, I really do trust him. And you know, uh, there in flashes of unhealth, there's a lot of insecurities for sure.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So here's a question I have for you with your relationship with your dad being a little bit more emotionally sterile.
Hmm.
Okay, I'll use that term of just not much emotional connection.
Yeah.
He was present,
Right.
but maybe not intimate.
Sure.
So I'm curious how that's played out in your relationship with God.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, probably in a lot of ways I'm not aware of. So, I mean, for sure, like that hits on something.
Was there a learning curve to the process of just deeply, intimately, emotionally connecting with God?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I'm still in it. I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
still learning that. That's
Because
that whole like,
there is a difference between like just enjoying him
yeah,
and then doing for him,
yeah.
serving him, making him
I mean,
proud.
that's what's so messy, right? Is like, and I'm curious how you feel about this. It's like I told Monica this recently. It's like it's frustrating because I feel it's like I want to be helped. It's like, man, I've got issues and I want to be cured and I want to work on those issues and I want to grow. And I feel like a hindrance is like I know the answers to the test. It's like I've taught the sermon. Spiritual maturity is not just knowledge of God, but the enjoyment of Him. Like I mean, I remember finding that line or writing that line, and being like, oh my gosh, that's so true.
Yeah,
Like I have to learn the enjoyment of God, and then I learn things in my own having my own son. It's like, man, I do just like delight in giving him things and watching him laugh and being with
right.
him, and that's like a lot of fun for me. And so, and I can imagine like, oh gosh, there's aspects of this. That's how God feels towards me. And so like I do learn those things. And yet I do when I do something stupid, when I like look at have a second lustful glance or get angry while I'm driving or there's something, then I do feel like God's disappointed in me, which is not the gospel because like God is pleased with me because of what he's done for me through his son Jesus. And it's like, man, I wrestle with that so much. I'm like, well, why do I feel like God's disappointed in me?
Mm.
And so there's certainly something there too.
If I had to just picture your relationship with God, I would imagine you and God in a pickup truck, kind of like you and your dad.
Yeah.
And I would imagine God driving and you just sitting there. And I'd be curious, and this is not something you have to answer, but just to even picture that and think, what does that conversation look and sound like?
Yeah.
Because it's going to look and sound very different from your relationship with your dad.
Yeah.
As great as your dad was, there was missing pieces to
Yeah.
that relationship that aren't missing in your relationship with God, but just maybe haven't been fostered, explored. Like, what does that look like if the two of us are just driving down the road for 2 hours?
Yeah.
You
Man,
know?
what does it look like? It's like I want you to tell me. That's and so it's like if I'm answering the question, I mean, I think he's like you know, gosh, I mean, I've been in Ephesians, and I'm not trying to, I don't want to play the Pastor Trump card. I think he's like, I choose you,
Hmm.
and it's like I choose you as my son, which is different, than like I didn't get to choose Weston as my son. My dad didn't get to choose me as my son. And so that's the beauty of the gospel is like we've been adopted. And so I think there would be some aspect of that conversation.
I think so too. Do you think you'd be talking a lot or would it be more quiet?
Man, I gotta think we'd be talking a lot. I've got a lot of questions I'd ask him. So I said that today. So I think we would be talking a lot.
Yeah.
But I also am, here on earth under the sun, I'm trying to get better at just sitting with him and like listening.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to imagine that because it doesn't seem like he's talking a lot right now, you know?
Do you resonate with hearing him say, "This is my son with whom I am well pleased"?
Hmm. I do. I mean, I believe it. Um, and it's like, it's messy for me because I think, oh, like theologically, like that's because of Jesus. Like he's saying that to Jesus, and that gets imputed on me because of the works of Christ. And so it's like, it's messy for me, but yeah,
Hmm.
it resonates.
Yeah, your theology gets in your way sometimes, I've noticed.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, for sure. I mean, I think that's 100% true.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the word for you today is that you don't actually have to do one more thing,
Yeah,
you know? Like God is pleased with you. And whether or not you do one more thing in ministry, in life, when you're quote unquote broken, when you're quote unquote strong, it's
yeah,
the same level of pleasure. The
yeah,
same level of pleasure, and maybe even more when you're broken. Like, when your kid is sick and you're just like holding him,
yeah,
whether it's a fever, it's like you're just bursting with love. Like, I'm here, I'm going to take care of you.
yeah,
And they might feel like they're broken in the moment, but God doesn't feel that way.
yeah, yeah. It's so messy, and I know we'll probably go for another couple hours, but it's like there's also the factor of, I mean, I feel a real angst. Like there's people all around me going to hell, and I resonate with Paul's words of I've been poured out like a drink offering. I've fought the fight. I've run the race. I finished the race. And so it's like those words really resonate with me too of like, all right, like I want to be used up, man. I want to steward every second on earth well, and I have a hard time reconciling that with eliminating hurry, if you will.
Hmm. Yeah, I get that. And I don't necessarily know that that's the answer for you.
Yeah.
But it is understanding that in order to keep pouring out, you have to stay filled.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. So whether we call it hurry, whether we call it whatever, the hustle, I think finding the more meaningful thing for you is if I'm going to keep pouring out, I got to stay filled.
Sure.
And what does that look like for me to make
Yeah.
sure I'm staying filled? Otherwise, I'm not going to do a good job. I will pour out that last drop way faster than God has called me to if I run out too quickly.
Yeah. No, and I believe that for sure.
So tell me how you are filling up in this season.
I think the game changer in that time was um was meditation. I mean, that was just something like I had never thought much about at all. And so I think really learning in that breakdown to meditate, and which was a lot of slowing down, eliminating hurry. Um, and so I still do that, and I use a principle called prayer cards that I got from a book called A Praying Life. And so I have my prayer cards in the morning. I read some scripture. I write down 5 things I'm thankful for, And then I just kind of flip through my prayer cards and think about each one and kind of pray a slower contemplative prayer, which, that it is a different day when that happens. And then a big litmus test for me is evangelism. It's like, I feel most alive when I'm sharing the gospel with lost people. I really enjoy those conversations. And so it's like I can kind of tell how spiritual healthy I am based on, all right, when's the last time I've had that conversation? How often am I having that conversation? And
Pause
and
there. That's where you lost me.
yeah, because it
Tell
feels
me
like performance.
how does that make you feel filled? Like why is that a litmus test that you're filled?
Yeah, it's just like I feel a lot of life when I'm talking about Christ with people who are interested in talking about Christ. Like that's Eric Little said, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. It's like when I'm sharing the gospel, I feel God's pleasure. And so it's messy because like if I was hearing myself say that, I would say, man, that feels like a little bit of performancy.
Well, not
Um,
even that. To me, it sounds like pouring out more than filling up.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think this is where I think we've had this conversation before where it's like, I think like people always process burnout from doing too much. And I'm like, man, there's a things that you do that are like really life giving. Like
Hmm.
there's a something that I do that I think a lot of people would say that's pouring out. And I'm like, man, I feel crazy alive in doing that. And so it's like, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sitting still for me feels like pouring out in a lot of ways. But like preaching a sermon afterwards, like, man, I'm like ready to run through a wall. It's like I love it, gives me life. And so that's another thing where I just have wrestled too.
Yeah. Maybe you're a little bit of an adrenaline junkie.
Well, I think that's like notorious in my field, right? I mean, I remember hearing Rick Warren had an adrenal disorder, and I'm like, oh man, that you have like I'm sure that's the case. You preach all the time. You preach 5 sermons every Sunday for a long time. I don't know how you wouldn't have an adrenal disorder.
Yeah. Well, it's the balance. It's not about not pouring out. Like I think God calls us to pour out and even being like high functioning, high efficiency, high performing people is not a bad thing, but
Yeah,
it's balancing out with how do I actually fill up and what does that look like and making sure I'm differentiating between the things that pour out and the things that fill up and not confusing the two.
yeah. Well,
So
yeah. Go ahead.
so you mentioned contemplative, slower mornings. Okay. Anything else that fills you up?
Yeah, I mean, like water, um, beautiful places, great meal, friends. I mean, I'm an extrovert, and so I've always heard that distinction is introverts recharge alone, extroverts recharge with people. So
Yeah.
that's where I think it gets complicated for me because if we're like talking about when we talk about filling up or recharging, and I'm like, well, then if that's done not by myself, it's like how do I do that? And so I've really wrestled with there too. You kind of hear that on vacation where it's like I go on vacation, it's like, all right, I'm really gonna not do anything. And it's like, man, I don't want to not do anything. That doesn't sound very refueling or refilling. And so I struggle. But yeah, I mean, other things, take a bath, a slow bath, and
How's your
listen to
physical health these
listen to
days?
worship music.
Nutrition,
It's
exercise, eating good food, hydrating.
yeah, I mean, it's not great.
That's another good way to fill up.
I guess it doesn't feel like it. I hate working out. I love to eat things that are bad for me. I don't like water very much.
You don't even like water, huh?
No,
Your brain's 80% water, JP. You got to
I
fill that
know.
thing up.
I'm doing something called 365 not so hard. I'm drinking half my body weight in ounces of water every day just because, but I don't like it.
Just because they tell you it's good for you.
Yeah, I don't enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is a good season to figure out what does fill you up and be intentional about it
Yeah.
and to do a regular checkup. Like, how full am I feeling? Do I need anything? How do I feel? What do I need? Those are
Yeah.
two important questions to just kind of gauge where you're
What
at and how you're
what are
doing.
what are the questions again?
How do I feel and what do I need?
Yeah. How do I feel? What do I need?
and just kind of checking in on your level of fullness each day and staying grounded. What I love about you is your heart is in the right place, and that is in the care of Jesus, you know,
Yeah.
um, and serving him, but also just enjoying him, like you said. You
Yeah.
know, I feel like that's the key for you in this season of just like, what is it for me to enjoy him and to also know that he's enjoying me?
Yeah. It's good.
You preached a great sermon about Martha and Mary
Yeah. Let's go.
and Mary's enjoyment of Jesus and him enjoying her.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need that balance in your life to fill up so you can go out and do what Martha does and continue to pour out and and keep checking whenever you feel like things start to get out of balance. It's like, okay, what's going on underneath the surface? What's fueling this?
Yeah.
Is it coming from a healthy place or not? And it's like, I feel like in ministry, it's that constant check of where's my heart today? Where is my heart in this moment? And taking ownership of that plate is an important part of the process too.
Yeah.
Like, what do I need to prioritize and what don't I need to prioritize? It's also humility and realizing that we're not indispensable. Like somebody else can do this.
Yeah.
Somebody else can do this job, this interview, this opportunity, this speaking engagement. Like where am I needed most? And God makes it pretty clear when we check in with him. He's not a God that's like say yes to everything.
Yeah.
That's more, I think, a JP thing.
Sure. No, I mean, I completely believe that.
Yeah. But I will say, JP, I always love chatting with you, and I love your heart to learn. And you're one of the most um real, just what you see is what you get
No, thanks for saying that.
leaders.
I hope that's true. I really do. I hope that's true.
Yeah.
I feel, I mean, I that's a great compliment because I told Monica, it's like, that's what I want people to say about me is, hey, he's the same guy off the stage as he is on the stage. I never learned how to play church games, and I don't want to learn how to play them church games. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm excited for you. I just feel like every time we talk, it's like you're kind of on these layers of healing, like
sure.
allowing God to reveal different things in different seasons that he wants to deal with and letting him
Yeah,
deal with it.
let's go. Session 2 in the books. I'm gonna need probably 10 or 100 more, but
Yeah, so
we're
so you're
getting
gonna you're gonna be a little bit more aware this
yeah,
month. Like,
for
where
sure.
is this coming from?
How
How
do
is
I
this
feel? What
impacting
do
my
I need?
relationship with God?
Yeah,
What would me and God say if we were sitting in a truck together?
I like it.
Is it more about serving him or enjoying him?
Yeah,
A few different themes that came out today that I think God's going to bring up back to your attention over the next few months, and we'll see what you do with it.
I love it.
I'm
Thank
happy
you.
that you're in a good place though, and that you're feeling healthy, and we'll stay in touch. Part three, maybe in a few months.
Let's go. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for helping people and thank you for helping me.
Yeah. One last thing before you go, JP. Tell us a little bit about what you're up to and how people can connect with you more. I love your messages.
Yeah.
You're one of the few pastors that I point a lot of people in your
Mm.
direction when it comes to just preaching the gospel. And
Mm.
so I'd love to
Yeah.
offer people a way to connect with you.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. So yeah, I just finished a book. It's on spiritual warfare. Your story has a villain. It's not out yet, and so I turned it in, and so that's what I've been working on is just a deep dive into spiritual warfare. And you can connect with me on Instagram. It's at Pokluda. That's at JPOKLUDA. And I do something on Fridays called Friday Q&A, where I just answer questions from people on Fridays about theology and the future, finances, friendships, relationships, sex, dating, millennials, Gen Z, all the things. And so, yeah, that's a few ways to connect.
Love it. Thank you so much, JP, for all that
Hey,
you're doing. And it was good to see you.
thank you, friend. Great to see you. Thanks for chatting. Thanks for helping me.
Take care.